Welcome to this quick start video on diagnosis from a billing perspective. Generally, insurance will pay for medically necessary chiropractic care if the care is pertaining to an injury or a current illness. They don't just pay for maintenance care, wellness care, so it does need to pertain to an injury. When an injury or a current illness occurs, the chiropractor needs to do an exam or x-rays if it's the first visit, or a re-exam if a new injury for an existing patient. From that exam, the chiropractor comes up with a diagnosis, and the chiropractor comes up with a treatment plan that will treat this illness or injury. Again, when we say illness or injury, we're not talking about necessarily a severe injury like a car accident or a work comp injury. We're just talking about basically something that happened that is causing pain or a problem for the patient in terms of their spine. During that treatment plan of care, the chiropractor does not need to change the diagnosis at all. So after the initial treatment plan is complete, let's say, for example, it was a 12-visit treatment plan. If the patient has a new injury, then the process starts all over. The chiropractor then does a re-exam and or x-rays, and from that re-exam and or x-rays, the chiropractor determines a new diagnosis. At the date of that re-exam, a new diagnosis, most likely different from the last diagnosis, is given by the chiropractor, and a treatment plan is written. Then the chiropractor treats the patient for the amount of visits that the treatment plan is for. Let's say, for example, another 12 visits. During that treatment plan, the diagnosis given by the doctor on the date of the re-exam stays the same. Let's give an example of this. An existing patient, so one that you've already treated in the past, but they pull their back out while working in the garden on Monday, June 1st. So then they come to your clinic on Tuesday, June 2nd. The date of current illness, which is the date that they hurt themselves, would be Monday, June 1st, because that's when they hurt themselves when they were working in the garden. So a re-exam would be done on Tuesday, June 2nd, because they came into your clinic, they have a new problem going on, so you are going to examine them again because they are already an existing patient, which you examined in the past, but they have a new problem. So you do the re-exam on Tuesday, June 2nd. The doctor will give a new diagnosis for that date of service, most likely. And the doctor determines that for this injury or illness that has occurred, that 12 visits are needed to correct this issue. So the patient comes in for care for 12 visits or so. During those 12 visits, the diagnosis stays the same because the doctor does the diagnosis when they examine, and then they give the treatment plan and say that that number of visits are needed to correct the issue, and the diagnosis stays the same through those 12 visits. The date of current illness or the acute injury date, it's called different things with different insurance companies and different softwares, but it all means the same thing. Basically, the date the patient hurt themselves or has this new injury, it stays the same through those 12 visits because you are treating them for those 12 visits for the problem that occurred on Monday, June 1st. On the 13th visit, after that June 1st injury, the doctor does a re-exam. If it is still the same injury, the diagnosis can stay the same for those 12 visits, or if it is a new issue occurring, they now have a new issue in a different region of their spine, then the doctor does a new diagnosis and determines that a certain number of visits are needed to correct this new issue. Let's say, for example, the doctor says 12 visits are needed to correct this new issue. So the date of current illness will be the 13th visit, the day the doctor does the re-exam, or it might be the day before if the patient tripped down a stairs, the day before, then that would be the date of current illness. It's going to be some day between the 12th and 13th visit when the patient hurt themselves again. Here is a chart that's also available for download, and it just kind of explains the flow of this. And this is for commercial insurance, Medicare patients, and Medicaid patients. The first visit is when an exam is done and the doctor, based on the examination findings, does a diagnosis, gives the diagnosis. And if you're wanting to do a 98941 3-4 region manipulation, that you're wanting to bill for that, then make sure that you diagnose 3 regions of the spine. Make sure that there are issues in those 3 regions, but you have to have 3 regions of the spine listed in your first 4 diagnosis codes if you are wanting to bill a 3-4 region manipulation. On that exam, the first visit, the date of current illness is either going to be the date of that first visit or the day a little before that when the patient got injured. So on that first visit, the patient is examined and the doctor gives a diagnosis and also develops a treatment plan and says how many visits that the doctor thinks the patient needs to correct this issue. So let's say, for example, the doctor recommends a 12-visit treatment plan. During visits 2 through 12, the doctor does not need to do a new diagnosis because they're not doing an exam during that time, so they don't have the tools to do a new diagnosis. They are just following the treatment plan that they set out on the first visit when they did the examination and gave the diagnosis. So the diagnosis can stay the same for visits 2 through 12. Also, the date of current illness or the acute injury date stays the same as was given on the first visit. So the date of current illness is either the date of the first visit or a few days before when the patient got injured. So that's what you do for visits 1 through 12. Now, on the 13th visit, so the patient has completed their 12-visit treatment plan. Now, the doctor needs to do a re-exam. They need to re-examine the patient and see, did what we do work? Are they cured? And we'll say that in quotes. Are they all better, or do they need an additional 12-visit treatment plan? Or do they have a new injury going on, and do they need a new diagnosis? So if additional care is needed in wanting to be billed, the doctor either does a new diagnosis or continues on with the same diagnosis, and the date of current illness would be the date of the 13th visit. If it's a new diagnosis, a new injury, then the date of current illness will be the date of the 13th visit or the day right before when they trip down the stairs, etc. For that 13th visit re-exam, the doctor gives a treatment plan. Let's say that he gives a 12-visit treatment plan for this new injury. Visits 14 through 24, the visits for that treatment plan, the diagnosis stays the same as done on the 13th visit. Because the doctor is not doing examination during those visits 14 through 24, so we haven't done the work to give a new diagnosis, and we don't need a new diagnosis. We already gave one. The doctor gave one on the re-exam visit, so the diagnosis stays the same for those visits. And the date of current illness stays the same as the 13th visit. So if the date of current illness was the date of the re-exam or a day before, then that date of current illness stays the same for all of these visits. And then on visit 25, another re-exam is done, and you just continue the process again for that treatment plan. And this is how you do your diagnosis and your date of current illness and your re-exam schedule and your treatment plan when you are wanting to bill to insurance. We also have available for download what we call a diagnosis cheat sheet. And this just gives some guidance in terms of a billing perspective for diagnosis. It's not telling a doctor how to diagnose. That is in the doctor's department and their specialty. It's just explaining from a billing perspective what certain insurance companies are looking for in terms of diagnosis. For Medicare or insurance patients, they are looking for primary codes and up to 3 regions of the spine if you are wanting to bill a 98941, a 3 to 4 region spinal manipulation. So here are the primary diagnosis codes, and here are some secondary diagnosis codes. Now, each Medicare contractor has specific secondary codes that they allow. So, you have to check specifically with your Medicare contractor, depending which region of the country you're in, to confirm that the secondary code you have chosen is an allowable code with your Medicare contractor. But these are some general guidelines on billing: primary code, a secondary code, a primary code, and a primary code. Also, just a little tip: a lot of insurance companies do not allow the M99.05 as the first primary code for code number 1. So it's a good idea to not choose that one as code number 1, just because it may deny. For Medicaid patients, if your clinic is billing to Medicaid, most Medicaids just utilize the primary diagnosis codes. So again, if you're wanting to bill a 98941 3 to 4 region spinal manipulation, you're going to need to choose 3 primary diagnosis codes. And normally you're going to want to choose as your code number 1 the region of the spine that is causing the most issues. And then code number 2 can be a secondary code if you're doing it for Medicare insurance patients, a secondary code which is applicable to the region that you chose for code number 1. Let's say, for example, code number 1, you chose M99.01 for the cervical region because the patient has subluxations issues in their cervical region. Then you may want to choose M54.2 cervicalgia for your secondary code, if it is applicable, of course. And again, that is up to the doctor to diagnose, but just giving some tips from a billing perspective on diagnosis. Lastly, for auto or work comp patients, I always say this is when the chiropractor can get fancy. Choose as many primary and secondary codes as are applicable to the patient's injury. Basically, the more diagnosis codes, the better. Of course, always if they're applicable, but the more codes that you utilize to really clarify the injury that has occurred is going to be in your best interest for billing.